Welcome back to the deep dive. Usually when you and I sit down to look at education reform, specifically for Black students in America, it feels like we're looking at a crime scene.
That's a very vivid way to put it.
But it's true, isn't it? We're always talking about failing schools. We're talking about the achievement gap,
The achievement gap, exactly.
budget cuts, crumbling infrastructure, all the systemic inequities. It's almost always a conversation about what's broken. It's
Yeah.
heavy,
Yeah.
and it can feel a little hopeless sometimes.
Well, it's what sociologists call the deficit model. And you're right, it's been the default setting for decades.
Mm.
We identify what's lacking and we shout about it.
Exactly. But today, we're flipping that script entirely. We're looking at a stack of internal documents, letters, proposals, implementation plans that ask a completely different, almost counterintuitive question.
Right.
Instead of obsessing over the schools that are failing, what if we focused entirely on the ones that are already winning?
It sounds so simple, doesn't it? But as we go through these documents, you'll see it's actually a pretty radical shift in strategy.
Okay, so what are we looking at?
We're analyzing a major new initiative from the NAACP. It's called the Best Academic Practice Models for Black Students Nationwide Network.
Which is a bit of a mouthful, I have to say.
It is a mouthful, but the ambition behind it is huge. We've got access to documents from October 2024 all the way through February 2025.
So pretty recent stuff.
Very recent. We have a call to action letter, a detailed proposal from the National Board, and final recommendations that were just approved. And the mission here, it's not just to hand out gold stars to good schools.
Right, that was my first thought. Is this just an awards ceremony? Good PR. But reading the proposal, it's clearly not that. It feels much more mechanical.
It's tactical. The goal is to identify schools where Black students are excelling, figure out why down to the specific curriculum or leadership style, and then replicate that success nationwide.
It's about turning luck into policy.
It's a great way to put it.
So let's dive into the why. This whole shift seems to kick off with a letter from October 25, 2024, from a Dr. Adora Obi-Nuiz.
Yes, she's the president of the NAACP Florida State Conference, and she's on the national board.
And she calls this an urgent call to action. But, playing devil's advocate for a second, the NAACP has been fighting for education for over a century. Why is this so urgent right now?
I think the urgency comes from a place of, profound frustration. In that letter, Dr. Wees points out something that's honestly painful for anyone in education to admit.
Which is what?
She says that despite decades of effort, lawsuits, protests, all of it, the achievement gap persists. The old method of just pointing at inequality of, shining a light on the problem, it hasn't actually closed the gap.
So shouting, "This is broken," doesn't actually fix the machine.
Precisely. It brings awareness, sure, but not necessarily a solution. So she proposes this narrative shift. She basically says, your state already has schools that are succeeding. You just don't know about them yet.
It's a move away from that deficit model you mentioned.
Completely. Away from what Black students lack to focusing on where they are thriving.
It's like a hidden figures approach for school districts. The answer is already in the room. We just haven't been looking for it.
Exactly.
But here's where we need to get specific. Because success can be a subjective word. They're not just looking for good vibes.
They not at all. In the proposal from October 2024, they define exactly what a success model looks like. And there's one key statistic that jumps out. They call it the 50% rule.
Okay, what's that?
This is the filter. The whole campaign is looking for schools and districts where 50% or more of Black students are achieving proficiency on state assessments.
Now, I'm going to pause you there because I can hear a listener thinking, wait, 50%, that's a coin flip. That sounds kind of low.
It's a completely fair question.
I mean, if my kid came home with a 50 on a math test, we'd be having a talk. So why is that the benchmark for excellence here?
It's all about context. You have to put it against the national data. In a lot of underfunded districts, proficiency rates for marginalized groups can be in the single digits or the low teens. We're talking schools where maybe 10 or 15% of Black students are reading at grade level.
Wow. Okay, in that context, 50% is massive.
Right. Finding a school where the majority, 50% or more of Black students are proficient, is actually finding a significant statistical outlier. It cuts through all the noise.
So if a school hits 50, They're doing something radically different than the school down the street that's sitting at like 12%.
Exactly. And importantly, identifying these schools requires a level of data literacy we don't often see. They're not just looking at a school's overall score.
Right, because that can hide a lot of disparities. A school could have a 90% pass rate overall, but if you peel back the layers,
If you look closer, maybe the black students are still struggling, while other groups are pulling that average up. This initiative forced them to break the data down by race, by reading versus math, by school versus district.
so a school with high test scores, but where black students are struggling, that school doesn't make the cut. It's not a best practice model.
Correct. Not for this mission. They're looking for specific pockets of excellence for this demographic.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. It's about precision. Now let's talk about resources. Usually a campaign this ambitious, 37 states, 2,000 branches, you expect a budget with a lot of zeros.
Millions for consultants, software.
Exactly. But I was looking at the cost line in the October 19th proposal, and I actually laughed.
It's jarring, isn't it?
It lists the cost as in-kind time, not money.
In-kind time. And that is a very deliberate, very strategic choice.
But is it realistic? Can you really overhaul an education system on volunteer hours? Burnout is a real thing.
It is, and that's the gamble.
Yeah.
But think about the alternative. If you get a big grant, say $5 million, that money has strings attached. And worse, it runs out.
Right, the pilot program graveyard happens all the time.
All the time. By relying on willing NAACP and community volunteers, they're building something that doesn't have an expiration date. They're leveraging their human infrastructure, their members, not capital. It makes the whole thing incredibly resilient.
Because it can't be defunded.
You can't cut the budget of something that has no budget.
That's a fascinating point. It shifts the ownership, too. If you pay a consultant to find the data, they own the knowledge. If you train a parent to find it,
The community owns the power. Precisely. It builds capacity.
so let's look at how that power is actually applied. How does this work on the ground? The proposal has a very structured key plan components list. Step 1 is obviously identification and data. And this isn't just Googling good schools, is it?
Oh no, this is old school investigative work. The state task forces are told to request public records, go straight to the state departments of education.
And they're getting the youth and college leadership involved in this.
Which is a bold move.
Yeah.
Getting students to audit their own schools. So they get the raw data, but then, and I think this is incredibly smart, there's a verification step. Because we all know a spreadsheet can lie, or at least hide the truth.
You mean a school could be teaching to the test, but be a miserable place? Or the numbers are just juked?
Exactly. Or it could be a statistical fluke from one good year. So the plan calls for virtual site visits by branch presidents. They have to verify that the performance isn't just an anomaly on a chart.
They need to see it in action.
You need to see that students are actually thriving, not just bubbling in answers.
Okay, so let's say they find a school. Ohio, maybe? 60% of black students are proficient in math. The branch president does a virtual visit. Everything looks good. It's verified. What's next? That's step 2, documentation.
And this is where most reforms fail. This is the transfer of knowledge. Usually it's just, good job, school X, and everyone moves on. Here, they have to create case studies. They have to answer the question, why?
Right. It's not enough to know that it works. We have to know how. Is it a specific textbook, an after-school program, a teacher retention policy?
Or is it something cultural, the way they handle discipline? The proposal talks about creating guides for replication. That's the key phrase. If it works in school X, they want a manual so they can do it in school Y.
And that leads to step 3, knowledge sharing. They talk about building centralized databases for these case studies.
Which is a profound shift for the NAACP. Historically, they're the watchdog. They bark when things go wrong, which is a vital role. But this moves them into being a knowledge hub, a repository of solutions.
They're not just pointing at the fire. They're handing out blueprints for fireproof houses.
I like that analogy, yes.
But, and here's my skepticism again, you can't just put a PDF on a website and expect a school board to read it. You need pressure.
We need boots on the ground. And the proposal accounts for that. There's a whole section on community engagement that's very grassroots. They're not just talking to superintendents, they're talking about town halls and forums to get parent buy-in.
And they mention partnerships with local churches, other groups.
Right. It's a full court press. You can't change a school system without parents demanding it. If a parent knows that a school down the road has a success model and their child's school doesn't, Well, that parent becomes a very powerful lobbyist.
And to get those parents ready, the training schedule in Dr. Nuise's letter is, I mean, it's intense. I had to double check it.
It's rigorous. Zoom workshops available 7 nights a week at 8 p.m. Eastern.
7 nights a week. That is not a casual volunteer gig.
It conveys a sense of emergency, doesn't it? It says, we do not have time to waste. And Dr. Nuise herself hosts the Wednesday trainings. This isn't being delegated.
There's also a media strategy that caught my eye. Usually it's just press releases, but they specifically mention TikTok and Instagram.
They want to show academic success stories to younger demographics. And this is brilliant because it addresses the peer narrative. In some communities, being academically successful isn't always seen as the cool thing.
Right. The athletes get the visibility, the influencers do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you can make academic success visible on the platforms where students actually live, you start to change the culture. You make excellence viral.
Okay, so that was the plan as of late 2024. Now let's fast forward. We have a document approved on February 15th, 2025. This is the recommendations for the next steps. This is where the rubber meets the road.
Yes. If the October docs were the vision, this is the marching orders. It sets the full internal implementation window for February through April 2025.
Yeah.
So this is theoretically happening right now.
And one thing that struck me here is how they refine the standards. We talked about the 50% proficiency rule for the state level, but at the local level, they introduce a much more personal metric.
This is fascinating. For the local branches, they're prioritizing schools with a 2.0 GPA or above, or a 70 on a 100 scale, and specifically with no F or D ratings in any subject.
No Fs or Ds, that is a hard line. Why the difference? Why not just use the 50% rule for everything?
It's about macro versus micro. The state standard, the test scores, shows you the system is working. It measures knowledge retention. But the local standard, the grades and GPA, that measures engagement, behavior.
So GPA is a proxy for the daily school experience.
Exactly. A student can be smart but fail because they aren't turning in homework. They're disengaged. By combining them, you get a full picture. You know they're learning and you know they're showing up.
If you only had one, you'd miss half the story.
You'd miss half the story. You need both to call it a success model.
The February document also lays out a tiered implementation strategy. It feels very hierarchical, almost military.
It has to be. You're trying to move a massive ship, so it starts at the top. National Board sets the direction. Then it flows down to the 37 state conference presidents, then to the 2,000 local branch presidents.
And finally, it hits the community forums to mobilize the public, a cascade.
It's designed so the message doesn't get diluted. Everyone, from the National Board down to a volunteer in a church basement, is singing from the same songbook.
Okay, so we have to address the elephant in the room, the ultimate goal. Why go through all this trouble? The February recommendations give a very specific answer. They designate this campaign as the #OneAdvocacy tool for showcasing equity.
This is the so what of the entire deep dive. This is why they collect the data, to use it as leverage for resource allocation.
Can you just paint a picture of how that works in practice?
Sure. Imagine you have 2 schools in the same county. School A is a best practice model. The case study shows why it works. Maybe they have smaller math classes or a specific reading program.
Okay, so you have the blueprint.
Then you have School B, 5 miles away. It's failing. Historically, the argument for School B has been generic. We need more money. And the school board says, we don't have it, or money doesn't solve everything.
I hear that all the time.
But now the NAACP can walk into that meeting, point to School A, and say, we know this specific strategy works. It's working 5 miles away. We have the data. Why aren't you giving School B the same resources?
It traps.
It moves the argument from abstract morality, you should do better, to concrete comparability. You're doing it there, why not here? It's much harder to argue against your own success stories.
That is powerful. But there's an even bigger hook here, a legal hook. Section 7th of the February recommendations. I mean, I actually sat up straight when I read it. They're requesting a formal opinion from the Office of General Counsel.
This is where the strategy goes from advocacy to, well, something like revolution.
They're asking for a formal opinion on the educational implications of Brown v. Board of Education.
Brown v. Board, the landmark 1954 case that ended segregation.
Why bring that up now, over 70 years later? What does a data campaign have to do with Brown?
Everything. Because the promise of Brown wasn't just integration. It was equal educational opportunity. But for decades, it's been hard to prove what equal opportunity looks like in a legal sense.
So they're establishing a standard of care.
Exactly. Think of it like medical malpractice. To prove malpractice, you have to prove a doctor deviated from the standard of care. You have to prove a cure was available and they chose not to use it.
So if the NAACP can prove, here is the standard, here is the best practice model, we know it works for Black students, and a district refuses to implement it.
Then they might be arguing that the district is legally failing to live up to the promise of Brown, that they are negligent, they are choosing failure when success is a known option.
That turns this from a campaign into a potential legal weapon. That is incredibly strategic.
And look at who signed off on it. Dr. Nuizi, Attorney Michael Curry, who's the chair of the Advocacy and Policy Committee, and Leon Russell, the chairman of the National Board. This is coming from the very top.
It really is a massive pivot. So as we wrap up, let's just recap the journey here. We went from a letter calling for action to a proposal relying on volunteers digging up records to a full-blown rollout that aims to use success stories as a legal bat to enforce equity.
The key takeaway for me is that shift in mindset. For so long, advocacy has been about identifying problems. This is broken, fix it. This initiative is about scaling solutions. This works, copy it.
It's a subtle difference, but it changes the entire dynamic.
It really does.
It puts the power back in the hands of the community because they're the ones holding the data. They aren't waiting for the district to release a report, they're writing it.
And it challenges the system to stop making excuses. If School A can do it, School B has no excuse.
I want to leave you with a final thought, something to mull over. The source material mentions these replication toolkits, step-by-step guides on how to copy success. If we have the data and we have the toolkits and we know which schools are succeeding for Black students, why has the educational system failed to copy them until now?
That is the question, isn't it?
Why did it take an outside organization relying on volunteers working 7 nights a week to build the network that the system should have built for itself?
It suggests that maybe the system wasn't looking for the answer hard enough. But hopefully this data forces the issue.
Listeners, we'd encourage you to look at your own local districts. Is there a school that's quietly crushing it? Maybe it's time to ask for the data. Thanks for listening to this deep dive.
Keep asking questions.
We'll see you next time.